First this morning, though, as you know, I'm sure, in the last couple of hours, Boris Johnson gave his final speech as Prime Minister. Gosh, it was like the end of a stand-up act, wasn't it? Joining me now, ITV News UK's editor Paul Brand, Boris Johnson's former aide Cleo Watson and Daily Mirror editor Alison Phillips. Great to see you all. Paul, what did you make of that speech?
Good morning, Lorraine. Well, it was classic Boris Johnson, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it sounded more as if he'd been in power for 3 terms rather than 3 years. He kind of reeled off this list of achievements that he felt that he'd knocked out of the park, whether it was Ukraine or the COVID vaccine. It was big on sort of energy and his usual bombastic style. Lots of self-congratulation, but not so much self-awareness, I would say. No apology for the mistakes that he made. In fact, you just heard him say there, didn't you? They changed the rules to get rid of me, rather than I'm sorry, I broke the rules as Prime Minister.
Yes, it could have been a little bit more self-aware, Cleo. I mean, you know the man, you know what he's like. This was not a surprise.
No, and the thing about Boris, he absolutely loves making speeches. He's actually had all summer to prepare for this one, so quite interestingly, seeing a lot of his aides out front, which showed that there wasn't the usual sort of run around to brush his hair and tuck in his shirt and find him a shoelace and print it off last minute and decipher his handwriting. So it would have been very carefully thought through what he said, and I think it would have been fine to just have just a taste of I'm going to go away and reflect on some of my mistakes and think about this a bit more while I plough.
Yes, that was bizarre and had everybody, of course, Googling, didn't it, Alison, to find out what exactly he meant. And when you look at it, it does seem that, you know, the hasta la vista moment, as I was saying earlier on, hasta la vista, baby, but then I'll be back. I mean, don't count him out, or what do you think?
I think it's probably quite unlikely he'll be back, only in terms of, I think that being Prime Minister is a really difficult job, as it should be. It's the most important job to look after your people. And I think what we saw of Boris Johnson was he didn't really like the difficult bits of the job. He loved the speech-making and the jokes and the gags and the, you know, and he was excellent on Ukraine. He's been out to see Zelensky several times, but he didn't necessarily like the detail. And that, I think, was probably what got him in trouble as much as the absolute lies. It was actually that he wasn't on top of the detail that could have avoided some of the lies in the first place. But as well, and in that speech, really, we saw the real Boris. So we saw he loves the jokes, he loves the gags, but he doesn't really like the detail of which was that he got himself into this predicament.
Indeed. And, of course, we have to look ahead now, because that's what politics are like, aren't they? It's like, by then, yesterday's man, and here's tomorrow's woman. Liz Truss has got a heck of an in-tray, hasn't she?
Yeah, a really, really seriously hefty in-tray. I mean, we think Boris Johnson is yesterday's man, but as we were just reflecting there, that's one
Maybe not.
Well, that's one of Liz Truss's challenges.
You don't want him on the back benches, right?
You definitely don't want him sitting behind you, as Theresa May sat behind him more recently. And he was certainly hinting, I think, today that he will be around in the background. The Boris Johnson circus is still open for business.
Right.
He'll still be drawing people's attention to him. Every time he utters a word, everyone will be scribbling on their notepads and writing up in the newspapers. So that's one of her big challenges. But yeah, of course, when you look at the country as a whole, huge challenges with the cost of living crisis, of course. We're expecting a speech from her possibly as early as Thursday on energy prices. Then she's got the situation in Ukraine, which she now has to take up the baton on. And all the while, you know, she's dealing with systemic issues in the UK, like the NHS recovering from COVID. So a massive in-tray for her.
No, absolutely. What do you think, Cleo, having been at the heart of all this, how do you think she'll do as Prime Minister?
I mean, one of the things I think is very good for her is that expectations are quite low. We're in such a dire situation.
And she didn't win by a massive majority, or as much as everybody thought she would.
That's right. And actually, a very difficult matter for her is to kind of pivot now from winning over the party membership to the country at large. She hasn't got amazing, you know, name recognition. And so she needs to quite quickly not only deliver really good stuff for people, because if there is a general election in a couple of years' time, she'll want to be able to reel off a list of things she's done as well, like Boris did this morning. But she also needs people to get to know her and to trust her.
We don't know her. That's true. We actually don't know that much about her. Maybe that's been deliberate on her part, but what would you advise her to do to get people to know her a bit better?
Come on your show, Lorraine, and maybe to know who you are. It's a good start.
Yeah, that would be nice. But she has got to know, and you're right, that's where politicians on shows like this, on This Morning, on JMB and Loose Women, they can all, you know, they can put the point across, I guess. And you know, Alison, she is the third female Prime Minister, which is interesting that they're all been Tories, which is quite interesting. Is she the candidate that the Labour Party wanted? Is she the one? Will they be happier with her rather than Richie Sunak?
Well, so interestingly, I think they thought that initially. They thought because as we were saying, she has been hugely underestimated, but also because we're in this awful predicament at the moment with the energy crisis. I mean, and people are so worried and so anxious for the future. She has got the possibility of coming in and alleviating so much of that anxiety almost immediately. If we have something by the end of the week, which is what they're indicating, then all of a sudden she could become the hero of the hour. So in that point, then she becomes much harder, I think. And also, we were saying earlier about the idea you go from sort of having like a really sort of big personality prime minister to a sort of slightly sort of sensible, boring one, which I think was perhaps the role that maybe Keir Starmer saw himself coming into after Boris Johnson. But now maybe if Liz Truss is going to fulfil that role.
Interesting.
And I wonder as well whether she doesn't want us to get to know her that well.
Maybe, yeah.
She doesn't have a huge personality. I mean, if you're looking for comparisons here, she likes to compare herself to Margaret Thatcher. Actually, I'd say she's a bit more sort of Gordon Brown, Theresa May. The kind of person who, as a minister, she kept her head down. She does work hard and she does deliver, according to her colleagues, in Cabinet. So she has got some strengths there, but her weakness is that when you step up to be Prime Minister, you need a bit more than that. You need charisma, you need a personality, humanity at a time of a cost of living crisis. Those aren't qualities that come naturally to Liz Truss. She would admit that herself. So I don't know whether she's going to volunteer that much about herself, actually. You might struggle to get her on the sofa, I'm sorry to tell you, Lorraine, because she's not going to want to go into those kind of interviews because she's not comfortable in that space.
No, but she may well, sorry to interrupt, but she may well kind of pick up and manage this. Like she's amazingly to me anyway, she's been in Cabinet since 2014. Uninterrupted. When you think of all the kind of seismic stuff that's happened in that time, she's survived, so she's canny, and she does have this kind of survival instinct somewhere. So maybe we're going to see something remarkable in the next days and weeks.
So interesting. You're absolutely right. And also, sadly, but we know this happens because it happened with Theresa May in her shoes, everybody is now going to focus on what this woman is wearing, how she presents herself, all of these things. I mean, they do it to a much lesser degree with men. I mean, Boris looked like an unmade bed, and that was commented on, and that was some, you know, a lot of that was, I think, contrived. It was his image, wasn't it? But a lot of that, she's going to have to cope with that, and I wonder how she'll do with that, because that's a tough thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and so I've worked for Theresa May, so I've worked for a woman Prime Minister before, and you have this incredibly long day. I mean, it is jammed with meetings, and yet there is this little layer on top of, like, how's the hair and makeup and clothes looking? Because people are interested in it, and it is a challenge, and you can't wear the same navy suit every day. People will notice if you wear the same dress back to back. But she can put that to her advantage as well. Like I said, she's not that well known by the public, so it's quite a good way to transmit who she is to people by wearing colours or sort of peacocking, I guess, wearing her Claire's accessories, jewellery, or Theresa May with her shoes, or Jacob Rees-Mogg with his pinstripe suits or whatever. It's a way to convey a message. She's short on time for people to get to know her. It's actually, it's a tool in the arsenal that she's got, so she can use that to her advantage.
She's got a tough job. She's got a hard job. And we have to wish her all the best, for goodness sake, for the sake of the country. Of course we do. Thank you. I know we're going to be talking about this lots more, but it's great to see all of you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Don't forget, you can watch full episodes of Lorraine on the ITV Hub and all the best clips, compilations and playlists right here on our channel. Just subscribe now and you'll never miss an upload. Click here to watch another video similar to this one, or click here to head to our channel's homepage to explore all of our exciting videos.